Leglia, who combined have over 25 years experience as QA engineers building QA teams and doing so with Agile principles. This is actually Mauricio's second year in a row speaking at Summit, but today they will be sharing success stories and kind of best practices on how to use Jira software, Bitbucket, and other tools to implement lean QA and Agile testing. So, welcome Mauricio and Giancarlo. Go for it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming. So we'll be talking about how we build in quality from day one using lean QA and Agile testing practices. So my colleague Giancarlo and I would like to start by having you imagine and come with us on a trip where we're going to imagine where QA is really not business as usual. And where QA, you have a QA team that works closely with the dev team to build quality software that you deliver to your end users. A world in which the QA team is actually there to enable the developers to build better software. And in this world, it's a place where QA is not the quality police. And in this world, it's where a team owns quality and everyone on the team owns quality. And rather than trying to test in quality in this world, we rather build in quality from the start, where you have everybody on the team there from the beginning of a sprint thinking quality and having a quality mindset. And if you actually build in quality, guess what? Quality is free. And imagine, if you will, in this world, a place where you deliver valuable features, where you're working on delivering valuable features to your customers so that when they receive your software, they're ecstatic on the software they receive. And they're actually excited to use your software. So the question is this world possible? And so we're here to tell you that, yeah, it's possible. At our last engagement, we transformed an organization that was over 100 years old and went from being a print publishing company to a digital advertising company. So a little bit who we are. So I'm Agile coach, evangelist, and director. I've been at this for 25 years, and my colleague Giancarlo, senior QA manager, has been at it for over 15 years. So at this last engagement, we put in a team structure called the QA Guild. We used a guild structure in which we had embedded people into Agile teams. And the reason we used a QA Guild is because we wanted to share QA best practices across the various teams. And Giancarlo will get into one of those best practices a little later on. So what did this QA Guild test? They tested pretty much any type of software you can think of, from mobile to web apps, to web services, APIs, back-end systems, search engines, any type of testing you can think of, this QA Guild was testing. And in 1 year, they tested over 800 releases. So we used a lot of tools, and the tools that we used to build in quality, Jira Software, Jira Capture, Confluence Team Calendars. On the dev side, we used Bitbucket, Crucible, Fisheye, using HipChat in terms of communication, and for our test repository, we used TestRail. So now it's great to have tools to build in quality, but it's not the tools by themselves that build in the quality, but rather it's the people. And this is why we sort of think that when it comes to quality, it's really a team sport. It's one of the areas where everybody on the team needs to think quality. And let me give you an analogy. If we look at this team, this is the Australian football team. And so people playing football, there's basic skills that everybody brings to the table. Everybody has to be able to run, everybody has to be able to handle the ball and tackle. Those are basic skills of a team. So we feel that quality is a basic skill on a software team that everyone needs to bring with them. And they bring it to the table whenever they build in quality. And I'll give you a little bit more on what I mean. So this here, what I'm showing you, is what I like to call the verification and validation spectrum. It's something from an article I published back in September. And it starts from the left when your customer asks you, I need the software to do this. And from that moment on, you have many opportunities to add quality to your software. From the customer involvement, to the PO adding in acceptance criteria, to your developers doing code reviews or unit testing, to your QA people doing system testing, and back to your PO at the end of the cycle doing user acceptance testing. But the ultimate measure of quality is when the customer at the end brings it live and goes into production. So at all of these stages, everyone should bring quality to the table. So we used two concepts behind it. We used lean QA practices and agile testing. I'll give you a little bit of what we did in terms of lean QA. Now, lean is based on the principles of lean. And if you go to lean.org, it basically says the core idea is to maximize customer value while minimizing waste. Simply, lean means creating more value for customers with fewer resources. So now if you dig a bit more into lean, everyone knows about the 3 M's of lean. The Muda, the Muri, and the Mura, or said in a different language, waste, overburdening of resources, or uneven usage of resources. And so today we're going to focus on waste mainly. And in lean, waste is bad. It's a bad thing. We don't want to waste. So what we do whenever we go into any engagement, we look for sources of waste in testing. And over the years, we've come up with a number of patterns we've seen in organizations that waste time in testing. Now, these might differ for your industry, but this is our experience. So we found organizations that try to test everything. For every build, they try to test everything. Or they try to do complete regressions. We found other organizations that try to use end-to-end testing, one of the most expensive methods of testing you can use. Other organizations we find do great documentation of test cases, but guess what? Instead of actual testing, they're writing test cases. And we found other organizations that try to find all the bugs, or that try to automate everything when it doesn't make sense. So today we're going to focus on 2 areas in terms of lean, trying to test everything and trying to find all the bugs. So what we employ as a strategy on trying not to test everything is something called risk-based testing. And risk-based testing at its most basic concept is where you do a system risk assessment based on 2 dimensions, based on impact and the likelihood of that happening to your end user. And what we do, we always start by looking at up in the upper quadrant where you have the highest impact and the highest likelihood of something happening. And that's where we test. We make sure we test that area very well. Then, depending on budget and time constraints, we move down in this assessment, and we might test in the moderate area, but guess what? We won't test in the low area, because we just usually not given time to test everything and get everything done. So this is one method that we employ to try not to test everything. Another concept, trying to find all the bugs. We know we won't find all the bugs. So we start with that premise in mind, and I'll give you an example, because there is a cost to finding bugs, right? We'll talk about 2 different types of bugs. Bug number 1, the hard to find bug. And imagine it's a mobile app. To find this bug before going to production, you're going to have to do 25 different things on your mobile phone to hit that bug. And it's going to take a lot of time. And pretend it costs $100 to find it. But guess what? Even if it goes to production, it's unlikely to happen. And even if it happens, it'll happen to a few users. So really the cost to fix it afterwards from an organizational perspective is $10. What we do is we focus on bug number 2, the easier to find bugs. Easier to find before production. Let's say you only have to do 5 things to find this bug before production. But if this hits production, guess what? If it's a mobile app, and let's say it crashes, you get users uninstalling your app. And from an organizational perspective, it damages your reputation, and that cost is huge. So we will focus on finding those types of bugs. So that's the lean, 2 of the lean concepts that we use. Quickly, we'll talk about agile testing. There's lots of documentation out there, but still lots of confusion. And some people say, well, you know what? Is Agile testing unit testing? Is it TDD, ATDD, BDD? Is it automation? Is it exploratory testing? Or is it really just manual testing? So I'm going to try to give it to you in one line. So Agile testing is you're testing early. Everyone's there at the beginning of a sprint. You're testing every sprint. You're making sure everything is production ready at the end of a sprint. You're testing the right stuff. You're not testing extra, no waste. You're testing the features you're developing with a little regression, and you're using the optimal methods. So that's Agile testing in a nutshell. These are the concepts that we use to go into an organization, and now I'll pass it over to Giancarlo for how we build in quality.
Thank you, Maurizio. So let's spend the next 10 minutes or so taking a look at a little more in depth how we managed to build in quality at this company that was over 100 years old. The first thing we had to look at was the people. And yes, the first thing we did was get everybody Agile training. That was the obvious thing to do. But once everybody's been trained on Agile and we're all speaking the same language, there are two things that we found that were key in making sure that the adoption to Agile succeeded. The first was taking a hard look at all of the product owners, taking a look at who drove each Scrum team and deciding whether those product owners were really technical enough to really give the answers the team needs to unblock them, the acceptance criteria they require and they seek. And in these instances where we didn't have technical product owners, we really made sure we had a business analyst there or a QA team that was really able to support them on a day-to-day basis to make sure that they were answering the questions for the teams and the teams weren't being blocked. The other aspect were the Scrum Masters. Whether you have one Scrum Master for your entire organization or you have multiple Scrum Masters dedicated to multiple Scrum teams, you really have to take a look and see, do these Scrum Masters stand alone? Are they the only ones in the organization who believe in the adoption of Agile and they're working against the current? In this organization, we found aligning the QA organization and that QA guild with all of the Scrum Masters was key in making sure that the Scrum Master had support in planning sessions, making sure that stuff that wasn't ready to be brought into the sprint were rejected and put back into the backlog to bring up key issues in retrospectives. Not, well, I like different drinks in the fridge and I like my chair to be like the ones on the other floor. Really bring up key issues in retrospectives to help the team progress in their adoption of Agile. Helping the Scrum Master prioritize and reproduce severity 1 issues that were potentially coming from production so that they minimize disruptions to the team in their current sprint, stuff like that. And the next thing we looked at was the process. And this organization really had to take a hard look at their Scrum teams and decide and identify which ones were agile and which ones were fragile. And the big difference is that the teams we considered agile were those teams that were able to deliver production quality builds in every increment. Whether they were going to production or not didn't matter, but they were fully tested and we were able to deploy those to production at the end of the sprint. The teams that were more incremental and iterative required multiple releases to get a production quality build that was able to go to production. And once we had identified those teams, we needed to be honest with ourselves. They couldn't have the same definition of done that more agile teams had, for example. So these were the 3 things that really were common in helping those incremental and iterative teams get to our ultimate goal of Scrum. The first, manual regressions. We needed to have a plan on how to tackle the backlog of tests that had been accumulated over time. Once we had a plan, it was not only making sure we had test automation prioritized in every sprint, just like we needed to dedicate some time to pay down technical debt on the dev side, we definitely needed to plan in time to tackle test automation in a sprint, not only to tackle that backlog, but to also make sure we didn't incur any further debt. Every new feature needed to have at least some level of automated testing and not just manual in the current sprint. The other was to have a realistic definition of done for those teams that reflected their current state. Yes, it's nice to have one definition of done for the entire organization, but the truth is that if it doesn't resonate with the team, it's going to be hard for them to achieve, and it'll really impede their level of adoption. So having a definition of done that is really tailored potentially to each Scrum team helped us in getting the message across. And then once the organization had really matured, then we had a definition of them that was common to everybody. When it came to our development process, the first thing we had to do is take a hard look at SVN and identify the deficiencies it had for this organization and really move to a solution like Big Bucket to really give us the ability to do feature branching. Our feature branching strategy was key in our adoption of Agile, and the ability to quickly merge, to quickly branch off of dev so that we can implement and test everything in a feature branch in isolation and then only merge it back in when features were complete were essential in having the ability to have a clean dev branch that was able to be packaged and shipped to production at the end of the sprint. Similarly, for hot fixes, anything severity 1 that would come in from production that needed to be fixed, Bitbucket gave us the ability to quickly create a hot fix branch, not rely on potentially a tag that didn't exist when we released previously. We've all experienced it. We didn't know when to branch in SVN, so having a clean master that reflected production, branching off the master, implementing that fix, fully testing that fix, running our automated tests against it, quickly deploying it to production, and then worry about propagating it back down into the other branches. We ultimately did have a goal, and we did achieve continuous delivery in most of the Scrum teams where we were working. But a stepping stone to continuous delivery is continuous integration. You can't have continuous delivery, obviously, without continuous integration. And Bamboo is a tool that we can use to really facilitate and make sure that the teams are not worried about what tests are running, when they're running, scheduling those automated tests, deploying to test environments, deploying to dev environments, deploying to staging environments. Bamboo really facilitates all of that for the Scrum team so they can worry about the features in the current sprint and not all of this administrative stuff. It provides test status directly to our test repository. It populates all of the Atlassian tools with its status, and it quickly notifies the team of build failures so that they can make changes and restore those green builds to our branches. When it came to our testing process, automation is one of those things that needed to be shared across the entire guild. Maurizio mentioned that we did share key things throughout the guild, and one of them was the automation framework. We didn't want specific Scrum teams, especially the geo-located ones, using their own tools, using their own methods. We wanted a framework that we were able to use and really give us no limitations. We decided to go with these tools, for example. We use a lot of open source tools. We created a Python layer on top of these open source tools, an abstract layer that really made all of those open source tools easy to swap out if ever we needed to. And we used Cucumber as a BDD tool, but only focused those BDDs on high-level business flows for UAT testing. We said earlier that we needed to share the testing across the entire organization, and everybody needs to think testing. So when it comes to breaking down the test effort, this is a bit how we assigned ownership to the different testing types. Unit and integration test, well, that was primarily the developer's responsibility. Those were the white box tests. They made up the bulk of our tests. They're quick and easy to run. They focus on negative tests primarily, and if you're going to do TDD, that's where you're going to do it. The next were our automated functional tests using the framework I just mentioned. Those were black box tests, and they're focused on extreme cases. They're focused on negative tests. They're focused on finding UI regressions. They're focused on failure testing using stubs for third-party dependencies. Manual testing does occur in the form of SIT and exploratory testing. And that's primarily done by our QA analysts. And performance testing is driven by our QA engineers. And like I mentioned, we use BDD with Cucumber to do high-level business flows to make sure those very important business flows that the product owner cares about are always passing. Here, I'm not going to go through the entire slide, but we're trying to highlight that in our effort to reduce waste, we don't run every single test and every single type of testing in every single branch. We want to make sure that in the release branch, for example, we run all of our testing types and all of our layers of testing. But for example, in the feature branch, we're going to run all our unit tests. We're going to run a portion of our automated functional tests, the ones that affect the functionality we're trying to get out. And we're going to do some manual exploratory testing to make sure that we have all of our test cases in line. Now, when we talk about ALM and traceability, there are some questions, but traceability, full traceability with Atlassian is entirely possible. I'll highlight some of the key areas here. All requirements for this organization were obviously in Confluence. We had every single theme described. Every single theme was linked to an epic. And we then broke down those themes into specific requirements. All those requirements were linked to a story. The acceptance criteria was further evolved in Jira, and then once that was ready to be brought into a sprint, in the planning, we tracked all subtasks, not just the dev work. We tracked the QA tasks, we tracked the design tasks, anything that really needed to be done, the DevOps task, anything that needed to be done to make sure that story was done was tracked in one story to make sure that when it was done, we knew we could merge it back into dev and we wouldn't have to touch it again in the sprint. Jira was the hub for the entire company. It's where everybody went to make sure they knew what they were working on to get the latest, making sure that Jira was in everybody's day-to-day lives was key in ensuring our adoption of Agile. So having the ability in Jira to quickly see the Agile board, for example, is good for each individual. It's at the tip of your fingers. You can quickly see what's done, what's in progress, what needs to be done. You're also able to see code commit and code review details at the touch of a button. You can have, with SSO, you're integrated with Bitbucket and Crucible. You can also create a branch directly from the Jira story. When it comes to HipChat, communication was key for us, and this gave us the ability to create a room that was specific for that story, not to create too much noise, for example, in a larger audience HipChat channel. So you can quickly create a room to get your questions answered instead of using email that people might or might not be looking at. Also with HipChat, for us, notifications are key. I just wanted to highlight a few here. We had potentially a channel that was dedicated to that Scrum team that they were monitoring, and you can use HipChat Connect, for example, to get all of the notifications from New Relic that we were using for our production monitoring, so it was alerting us of issues we should be looking at throughout the day. It really gave us the ability to see into the builds, identify what was failing, and it also provided a way for customer support to raise severity 1 issues, and those were logged directly into the HipChat channel so we can react on them and get our time to response time down. We also used a small plugin for Confluence Team Calendars. So for Team Calendars was used, the team liked it a lot. It gave us the ability to quickly look into what each Scrum team was doing, what sprint they were working on, what was deployed to production, what was coming up. And no traceability would be complete without direct link from your test cases to your requirements. TestRail and Zephyr as well do a great job of making sure that that traceability is complete. Here we use TestRail as an example where all of the test results that were being fed into TestRail by Bamboo or by manual test execution are visible directly in the Jira story, as well as all the test cases that are linked to that story are also visible. And you can quickly add a test case as well when you're trying to generate test ideas directly from the Jira UI. Now, is this possible in your world? I'll hand it back to Maurizio because it definitely wasn't easy, and Maurizio will give you a strategy on how to tackle those barriers.
All right, thanks, Giancarlo. So we started the presentation by asking the question, is it possible? As you've seen, it is possible. But we did get some naysayers, people that put up stumbling blocks as you're trying to deploy this build quality mentality. And I'll share with you three things that we heard. One person told us, you will never convince people to work towards this goal, right? The next one we heard most commonly, that will never happen here. Our culture is just not right? Playing the culture card. But my favorite, my ultimate favorite, and tell me how many people in the room have heard this one, we just don't have the time to do it right. Show of hands? Yeah. But we have the time to do it again and again, right? Yeah. So what we do is we deploy, we use a creative destruction technique where we ask people questions back to them to make them think. And I'll share with you some of the questions we use. So we start asking them, well, would you rather, hack software and just get it out? Or would you rather do it right the first time? So some other people, we ask them the question, Well, would you rather do rework and fix bugs, or would you rather work on those valuable features that our customers want? Some other people, we asked them, well, would you rather spend that precious budget on rework, or should we spend precious budget delivering valuable features to our customers? And would you rather be on the team that's ashamed of the software, or on a team that's proud to stand behind their software? So these are the kinds of questions we ask them, and a lot of times we break down the walls and people come along. So some key takeaways for everyone here today. 1, reduce waste in testing. Every organization has opportunities to reduce waste in testing, and if you plan for it and do it right, you can find those opportunities. You should do that. As Giancarlo mentioned, any Agile implementation needs continuous integration. You cannot do true Agile if you don't have continuous integration. Along with continuous integration, you need test automation. You're not a true Agile team without test automation. There's just no way you can keep up. And build that culture of building in quality. If you build it in, it's way cheaper than trying to test it in afterwards. And finally, full traceability with Atlassian and TestRail or Zypher is possible, and you should go for it. And that's really all we have. Any questions?